Is a video podcast still a podcast? That's one of the big questions we had for Matt Starker, CEO of Audiochuck, the media company founded by top true crime podcaster Ashley Flowers.
We also got his take on two other major debates happening in the podcasting world, clipping and the rise of AI podcasts. Matt Starker's career has spent everything from private equity to business development roles, just to name a few. In April 2025, he became the CEO of Audiochuck, which right now has roughly 100 employees and is expanding beyond true crime. Let's jump right in. Is a video podcast still a podcast?
It's a great question. Yes, I think so. I think the format is expanding so widely. Like, as long as they are putting out the audio version of the video podcast, it's a podcast in my point of view. Where do you guys stand?
It's interesting. I mean, I think one thing that's been so interesting is to hear from Spotify that like there are basically YouTubers are putting their shows on Spotify and they don't really have traditional podcasts and they're charting. So
Yeah.
it's like this interesting kind of moment where I do think like, I don't know what's different from like Michelle Carre's YouTube show and a podcast. It's like a familiar format. It's not that different. And then talk shows, like if you look at like Call Her Daddy's set, like that just looks like a very, very professional operation. So I don't know. I don't know where I shake out, but I think the lines are blurring and this year is going to be even bigger. Everyone's acting like, oh, okay, podcasts are video now. But like there is so much that has to happen in the industry to make that shift. And you guys are expanding this onto YouTube and there's still a lot of confusion. And then the Apple announcement recently about kind of so like there's a lot happening. It's not like, okay, we're done and we're moving to video.
YouTube's the largest podcasting platform out there, right? Spotify is second, and one is video at its core. Spotify pushing video as hard as they can. Apple just announced it with some really great technology to like help on the monetization front. Like video podcasts, it's a format, right? Video podcast, audio podcast. I think you got to do both though to be called a podcast. You got to be in both formats. But I think it is, yeah, Kai, I agree. The lines are blurring at an incredible pace. But if you're in both places, you're a podcast.
I think about it from the consumer angle. And one thing I've said, throughout my career studying this space is that people don't care as long as they like the content. Like they don't care what you call it. And think about books and audiobooks, for example. It's so interesting. Kaya, I listen to you sometimes because you talk about audiobooks. I don't read them because I like a physical book, but you say you read it, right? And so you don't even really differentiate between whether you're listening to it or reading it. And I think ultimately that's going to be the same thing between video podcasts and audio podcasts. I just think the lines have blurred so deeply and consumers just want good content regardless of what form it comes in. I think the challenge then becomes like, if you have a video podcast, it is more of a commitment from the viewer, right? You're sitting and watching. Whereas I think one of the reasons podcasts got so big is you could just plug your headphones in and go for a walk or go for a drive, or, it could be on your commute on the way to work, or you could be cooking dinner, any of those kinds of things. Whereas with television and with video, it tends to be more of an experience where you want to actually sit down and watch what's going on the screen as well.
I also think there's the background noise of TV that just like is such a welcoming feeling and sound in the room. And like when I was growing up, like ESPN Sports Center was like the thing we listened to. We put on the TV and we listened to it, right? Yes, we turned our head every once in a while. And I think that works for the true crime genre really well. It's like you can put on Tubi or you could put on YouTube, you could put on the deck and you could listen to or watch kind of interchangeably, hours of that content. And I think that works really, really well for someone who's making dinner or for someone who's like out in the garage building something. Like I feel like sometimes the device that's accessible to you is the format that you're choosing. And so it might not be that you really want video or you really want audio, but it's just what's available to you and like what you're able to give to that screen at any given moment.
It's true. I put on Spotify to listen to music from my TV in the kitchen. So, I mean, that makes perfect sense.
I actually don't want video on Spotify because I feel like it's just draining my battery. And I'm
not playing the video when I listen to music on TV. It's literally just audio.
I think the other piece that's like muddying things further is the rise of clipping, which has obviously exploded. And I think also what's so interesting is you hear people say like, "Oh, I love that podcast," but like they only like watch it on TikTok, right? Via clips. So curious your thought on that. Obviously, it's been a huge growth engine and it's like a marketing tactic. But then there's also been this rise of like vertical podcasts, like Subway Takes is technically a podcast, but they don't actually publish. Now they're starting to get into long form, but like the whole show is just the clip. So curious your thoughts on all those things.
Yeah, this is super fun. Like this is rights management, right? This is like I'm a nerd. I love this. I think about this all the time. And when I think about like the sports world, like the podcasting space, the entertainment space is moving more into the sports world where like a single clip could be all that you want. Like a single highlight could be all that you want. And so as operators and like IP owners, like how do you not give too much value away in this clip strategy on these social platforms where you're not monetizing at the level that you are on other platforms? But how do you use that as lead gen or top of funnel audience development to get them into your show and introduced to your show and then come back to your platform? Like I am of the strategy where like less is more. Right? I think it's hard to take back content from the consumer. And so you really want to be methodical about how you're rolling out your clips to make sure that too much value isn't leaking out of your monetization ecosystem. And I think like the quintessential example that I use internally is the NBA. And like the NBA like is one of the biggest and most forward thinking social media leagues out there and have done an amazing job of developing a really young audience base by putting their clips out there. And they constantly say like, how do we quantify all the people watching on social media versus our television ratings? And how do we report that back in a unified measurement way? And that's really hard. So before we go too far on the clipping side, we want to make sure that we are really thoughtful about where do we have any leakage? How do we work with the platform partners? And how do we have a holistic view of monetization and audience before we go too big?
But it's not just clipping, right? I mean, there are now shows that are being built primarily for short form. I mean, Kaya, you mentioned Subway Takes. I mean, that one is primarily short form, even though now they're leading into long form. How are you thinking about that? Like, could you see a world where you release short form podcasts?
I mean, we talk about like the micro drama space is obviously like a buzzword in an industry that people are exploring. We're doing our research on it. We absolutely see a world where we could put like 30, 40 clips together, 30-second, minute long, 3-minute long clips together to create something that is either a documentary or is like a show unto itself. I think this is like, it comes back to like what people want and how much time they're willing to give the content. And like, this is a clear early signal right now that this is what younger consumers want. This is where they're going to spend their time. And so as a studio, we have to do our homework to figure out like, how do we think we can play in the space? And right now we're in studying mode.
AI is really dominating the conversation. I think what I found so interesting is in our interviews with podcasters in particular. I mean, I think there's a lot of anxiety, there's opportunity, but podcasters in particular, I found have like a specific aversion to AI. Like a lot of them are like, no way will I do an AI clone of my voice for an entire episode, right? Maybe they're using it a little bit in post-production, but curious how Audiochuck is using AI.
I mean, AI is here to stay, right? So we're leaning into it. We're not leaning into it in terms of like production, right? And we're certainly not leaning it into in terms of like replicating our host voices, but we are leaning into it in terms of like, how do we shorten the time from case selection to research packet to reporting? And so like we've built an internal tool called Chuck OS. So Chuck is the sonic signal at the end of all of our podcasts. It was Ashley's dog, and this is a it's basically a case information tool powered with AI to help us understand what cases are likely to resonate with our audience, what cases have like, case files on them or information, or are they coming from like being recommended to us from family members or law enforcement. It then looks at all of our older cases and rates them. Like all of our existing public episodes, and then rates it against that. And then it gives it a score. And from there, it goes to potentially goes to a reporter to go then start the process. But now we're not starting from zero. We're starting from, a place where we have a high probability of a very successful case and a high probability of a case that has a lot of information for our reporters to go dig into to get the facts and then tell the story. So that's where we're starting. It's on that pre-production phase. Once we nail that, I'm sure we'll think about other ways to use it. But to me, if we can get AI right, it's an operational moat for our business. And so like that's where we're spending the time. It's how do we use AI in our operations, not necessarily our content at the moment. And then once we feel good about the operations, we'll start thinking about other ways to use it.
So you're not using AI in your content and you're not using it to replicate, host voices, but there are other companies and people out there who are. I mean, there was recently a case of a radio host's voice being used without their permission. We've also seen reports of these AI generated podcasts getting hundreds of thousands of downloads. What's your take on all of that? I mean, is that where the industry is just headed? And if so, what does that mean?
I hope not. I think it goes back to the personal relationship in this medium. Like, in my opinion, consumers and fans and listeners and even viewers now, they're looking for someone to trust, right? And there's so much information out there that when you find someone who you understand their values, you appreciate their perspective, you really like the way they tell a story or interview or whatever the format is, like you want to listen to them, you want to spend your time with them. I think that's what matters. And I think like, yes, there'll be lots of content that is generated with AI. I just don't think that personality driven content is going to be substituted with AI.
So Ashley, of course, is one of the most well-known names in true crime. Expanding from kind of podcast host to building a media company is not an easy feat. So we're seeing creators hire, seasoned executives to help them and really build big teams around them. So what are your biggest priorities to grow the business this year?
Yeah, I think as you think about the shifts in the space, like podcasting is an amazing medium. But when you think about the total addressable market, it's smaller than the video space, right? It's smaller than the market for video. And so the first and biggest initiative for us is entering into the digital media space from a video perspective. And so we have 2 shows on YouTube right now. We have Crime Junkie, we have The Deck. It is a large priority for us and we are scaling incredibly quickly. It's so funny as you think about like the YouTube platform, you spend a year, 9 months building awareness, building sort of a rhythm of content. And then all of a sudden you hit like hyper velocity and hyper growth. And we're just entering into that like hyper growth phase, which is so fun to see. And the team is so rewarded by all the work and the growth there. So that's priority number 1. And then the second is enter into the, premium TV and film space. And so how are we packaging up our IP and adapting that IP into the bigger streaming platforms like a Netflix or like an Amazon, and then bringing, reaching audiences where they are on the streaming platforms.
As you're thinking about, building out these new formats and leaning more into video, are you also thinking about expanding your verticals or are you planning on sticking to true crime?
We have ambitions to be bigger than true crime. I think one of the things that is really important is, we are a startup and a lot of the creators today they're startups and then they are entering into growth phase. And so one of the things that we need to be really thoughtful about is how fast do we grow? Where do we spend our time as we're growing, not just formats, not just shows in one category, but where are we expanding into a new category? And so priority right now is making sure that we build a solid foundation on the true crime space. And once we have that solid foundation across multiple different formats, so building out our flywheel in the true crime arena, then we'll move into a new vertical. So that'll be something that we push out later into 27. 26 is about building out the flywheel for the true crime vertical.
Do you have any thoughts on what verticals, what categories you might be pushing into in 27?
We have spent a lot of time batting this around internally. And so our audience at Audiochuck is highly female. It's like 91% female and it is young. And so it is like under 35 is really the demographic that we hit. We had basically a decision point. Do we make more for that demographic and basically take advantage of our competitive moat, which is we have this audience, they're coming to us every single week across multiple different shows? Or do we try to expand our addressable market and enter into either a different female demographic or into the male demographic? We have landed that we are going to super serve our core audience. And so we're going to be looking at genres that fit that under 35 female audience We don't know exactly what we're going to be entering into. But what we do know is the type of content that we're going to go after. So like we are a scripted company. And in the future, we will be focusing on like how do we add non-scripted or unscripted content into our repertoire, and then it will be the host will really be like the big driver of where we want to go. So, and you guys know in the podcasting space, and even as you translate podcasting into video, like that connection with the audience is what makes you successful or not. And that's not a host, that's a producer host, that's someone who's in the work, really building the content from the ground up.
Speaking of finding the right host, I mean, one of the topics that we hear debated a lot in the industry right now is key person risk. It comes up a lot, especially in conversations with investors. Audiochuck, of course, raised about $40 million recently. How do you think about that? And how are you thinking about expanding Audiochuck when it is so closely associated with Ashley Flowers?
And true crime, too.
And true
not
crime.
just person, but genre, too.
Ashley Flowers is our founder. She's our, chief creative officer. She's the host of 2 of our shows. She is undoubtedly a keystone to the company, but we have built, a engine of franchises in the true crime category. So we have, 7 weekly shows right now. 5 of them are in the top 50. The rest are in the top 100. And so we've proven that we can build content that is outside of Ashley Flowers hosting it. She's still very much executive producing it and putting her creative touches on it in her chief creative officer role. That's what we want to be building. We begin to be building more shows, and then we also want to go deeper within the brands that we have. And so, in a world where Crime Junkie, you can imagine a world where Crime Junkie is not just a weekly show, but it is a brand with lots of formats underneath it. And a good example of that is we launched Crime Junkie Jury, which is a live sort of version of court TV on YouTube. And that was around the Karen Reed trial. And that wasn't hosted by Ashley Flowers, right? But that was her creative vision. And so as we think about like the evolution of this company, yes, it's growing into new verticals, but it's also going deeper and really creating these shows and building these shows into franchises with multiple talent underneath them, multiple formats, multiple shows, and truly start to think about like their own universe inside of these bigger brands.
It's also impossible. Like you can't scale one creator, right? Like she can't host, 15 shows a week. So part of it is just
we wish she could, though. The audience wishes she could too.
So where do you kind of shake out on the key person risk debate? I mean, do you think it's overhyped in this industry, or is it kind of the reason that these businesses can be such a success?
I think it's a pro and a con. I mean, to me, it's like you need to figure out how to like leverage the creative vision of the founder, right? Or leverage the creative vision of the host. Like if you are solely going to rest and build on their like efforts in their hosting or their, singular brain power, if it's not a, entertainment company, like you're never going to scale past like that one human being. And so like you have to find ways to take their taste and extend it, or you have to find ways to take, their vision and operationalize it outside of them. And that's what we're working on. She's the ultimate crime junkie, but she's basically rose her hand and said, I want someone to come in and scale this business beyond me. And so like, that's my job and I love it. And I think about it all the time.
You mentioned streaming services earlier. They have lately been very interested in podcasts now that they've expanded to video. Netflix in particular has been quite aggressive. Audiochuck announced a deal with Tubi recently. What are some of the benefits of expanding and making content available on streaming services?
I mean, everybody's looking for entertainment, like their share of entertainment time, right? And so how do you get more of that consumer's time? And, if you look at all of our personal habits, we are spending time on our phones, we're spending time on the big screen, we're spending time on our computers. Like, how do we show up where the consumer is? And so when we think about our distribution strategy, historically, it's been let's launch on Spotify, Apple, and let's be where the audio consumer is. And then it's a natural expansion to take your vodcast and put it on to YouTube. And so we started out with the ambition of like, let's nail it for YouTube, but then let's make this content portable for streaming platforms when they're ready. And the hypothesis is this content is really good. At least, our shows are really good and there'll be demand for the streaming from the streaming services. And then we want to take that package with Tubi and what we've learned, and we want to start putting it to more streaming services because consumers have their default setting, which is some people love Tubi and some people love Pluto and some people love Roku and some people love Netflix. And we want to make sure that whenever they turn on their, whatever app they go to, Crime Junkie is an option for them, or The Deck or Park Predators, all of our shows.
How challenging was it to kind of pivot to video, especially with true crime, right? You don't always have a lot of kind of B-roll material. And then adapting it for a Tubi or a streaming service, how much work is that to then go from a YouTube to streaming?
I think like we went from an audio studio to a video studio, and that's a ton of work. I mean, like, no doubt about it. Like one format to two formats, audio and visual. Like honestly, we're still working through it. Like this is a big change for studios to do both on a weekly basis. And so when we think about like the schedule of our shows and the output that we need, like we have to take what made us really great, which is great reporting, factual accuracy, fact checking, like legal rights clearances. We have to take all of that and port that into a video process that works in a weekly format. You guys know how hard weekly formats are. And so what we're doing right now is we're investing into that process. We're operationalizing that process. And so that we are 100% certain that we have all the rights, that the fact check is perfect, the research is perfect, and then we feel good about the distribution. So it's a different muscle for us. It's actually like really fun to operationalize it and create like a multi-platform studio, but it is a big challenge. It's a big undertaking. And I think like you mentioned true crime. Like I think I spent a lot of time thinking like there's so many successful true crime shows out there, but there's not very many successful true crime networks. And as we were investing into building the operations around the audio and video network, like true crime, there's a level of factual accuracy, which is 100%, that is unlike other genres. And so you need a ton of supporting staff, off-camera staff, to make sure that you have all the right people with all the right expertise and all the right resources in place to move forward in this at scale, to move forward in this genre at scale. And so I was like, why don't more people scale up off of their successful show? And I think it's just really expensive to build out these networks in this vertical. And we've done it. We've done it really well. And I think like, we are really just at the beginning, but we've done a good job of operationalizing all the key things, key metrics, key measures that we have to do in order to be successful.
So it's a different muscle operationally, but I imagine it's also a different muscle for the hosts of these shows, right? I mean, I feel like that's a tale as old as time, that people are good on radio, but they may not be good on TV. How do you kind of approach that as you're thinking again about expanding, your shows and into different verticals and formats?
It's so interesting you say that, because as we think about new talent, like we start to have a different checklist, right? And so like the beats and the energy that someone has in the audio space is so much different than what is successful in the video space. And so you start to think about like, what are you optimizing for? What's most important to you? Like, where do you see the scale of this business going forward? It's a challenge. We think about ourselves as premium. We are a premium brand, period, end of story. Like everything we do is premium. We invest in like audio engineering, we invest in the talent, we invest in the scripts. And when you move into both of these formats simultaneously, you can't necessarily, based on the technology today, drive both of them at an incredibly high level from an audio perspective, right? You have to choose whether you're going to have like the video audio or the audio surface on both on specific platforms. And so that's something that we haven't fully locked in on. But when we think about the talent, just to go back to that, when we think about the talent, like you have to optimize for both, and you have to optimize for making sure that they are incredibly successful in the audio space, but also have the ability to be, engaging visually as well.
What can you tell us about how the deal landscape with streaming services in particular has shifted?
The exclusivity is a new one in terms of distribution, and so I think that's a big deal point that comes up, is like, where do you want to spend your time, and are you willing to make a bet that that your audience is going to find you on a single platform? And that comes with a lot of new counterparty risk, even if the platform is one of the biggest in the world. And so for us, non-exclusive was a really important deal point. I think as we think about like the current state of our business and how we want to scale the audience and how we want to make sure that we get our content out to as many people as possible, exclusivity out of the gate was off the table. And so we were a non-exclusive deal right from the start. And so people value different relationships. People value different partnership tie-ups. But for us, it was non-exclusive right from the beginning.
How much can you say about how the terms have shifted for these deals, right? Like it used to be this big ticket number. Now it's more about kind of the ad revenue sharing on the podcasting side. So I'm sure you can't go into a lot of the nitty gritty, but what are you seeing kind of zooming out in terms of like, what do the terms really look like when you're talking to streaming services versus kind of the past era of like the Spotify deals?
Honestly, the terms are kind of the same, right? It's like, what content are you distributing to them and how much are they paying you back? Or like, how are they recouping that? What's the revenue shares against that? Or if there's a licensing fee, what's the licensing fee for the content? And so I think from like a deal perspective, the terms are pretty much the same. But what I'll say is like the middle has kind of dropped out of the market, right? And so like the bigger shows with the bigger audiences are taking the lion's share of the time and resources from the streaming platforms. And the middle is finding it like having a really hard time of securing an exclusive deal or even a non-exclusive deal. And then the emerging platforms that are emerging shows that are coming up with some of the bigger name talent, like the platforms are willing to take bigger bets on them and say, hey, like we might build our own, like Pete Davidson. Let's take a bet on Pete being really successful with Netflix, right? But where I find the appetite for partnership is either the really big players or like A-list talent that is just starting. But those folks in the middle who were doing really great deals and had a lot of opportunity in the market with really competitive audio only deals on the video side, they don't seem to be as attractive or as in demand.
What's the impact of that? Is that sort of like the shrinking middle class of the creator economy where the big kind of stars get bigger and then you have this niche long tail? Like what will be the longer term impact?
I think that's exactly right. Like I think this is going to be a typical like head of the tail and then a decline with a really long tail. And you're going to start to see like this will be more like a traditional market as opposed to like there was a nice fat middle for a really long time where you could create a nice business and be sort of like 50,000 downloads per episode. And that worked out really well. 100,000 downloads per episode. That worked out really well. I think unless you have an opportunity to really scale, unless you have an opportunity that you like a connection with your audience, like that is unique and that can transfer and be portable across platforms. So formats and platforms, audio to video, YouTube to Netflix, Netflix to Tubi. I think you're going to start to see a lot of, podcasts, a lot of creators start to think differently about how they run and operate their business or how they scale it. The one caveat is like, I'll say, the business community, like those can be smaller shows and be incredibly impactful because the audience is so targeted. And so for some of those business focused shows, I think you still have a really good business, even if you have a smaller audience, like the size I talked about, because they're so targeted and they're high earners and they're exactly where advertisers want to be.
So going back just for a moment to your shift to video, how does that impact your employee hiring needs, for example, or your strategy, not just for future hosts, but for other people that you're bringing into the business?
We have new titles across the board. I mean,
Like
we talk about showrunners, right? Like we start to think about our business more on, like as we think about like the expansion, it's more like a TV style expansion, right? We still have our audio producers, our audio engineers. Audio is always going to be core to this business. It's the root of how it was started. Like we're Audiochuck. We're not going to change the name. Like the heritage of this business is there. We need to make sure we're premium, but we're making TV shows now. Right. As we think about it, it's a weekly TV show. We need that DNA. We need those roles. So we have episodic producers, we have showrunners, we have EPs. Like these are more traditional television roles. And that's where we're hiring from. Right. So we're hiring from the traditional TV market. We try to go after, folks who have true crime experience. The genre is just so unique in terms of what the production schedule looks like and some of the different ways that we use archival versus a typical show. But yeah, it's a big TV model push for us.
Are there certain roles that are more important than others? Is there like a specific, role that you've been targeting or prioritizing over others?
Two roles I think are incredibly impactful. The first is the EP, right? Like who is setting the vision for the show? Who is working with the host? How are they making sure that the cases are being selected right, the schedules running properly, like the scripts are in the best possible place. So the EP role is undeniably one of the most important roles to get right and make sure you have an experienced executive in that seat. And then the second role is the post producer, like the post editor. Like it's amazing to me how much magic an editor can do, both on the audio side and on the video side. Like the way that the team that we have, the teams that we have, and the people at the head of it, the talent that they have to make these episodes great and to add visual impact and to add, suspense with like a pause. Like, it's just amazing what they do. And I think those two roles drive the most impact outside of the host, of course. Those two roles drive the most impact.
How big is Audiochuck? How many employees do you have, and kind of what are your hiring plans for this year?
Yeah, we're in expansion mode. So we're just under 100 employees right now. We were about 50 or 60 18 months ago, and we want to grow by about 30% this year. So we're hiring. If anyone's out there who has these skill sets, this is a plug. But yeah, we're growing.
To wrap up, one piece of advice. What would you say to operators and people coming from traditional business backgrounds who want to work in the creator economy?
Don't wait. I think now is the time. Like when you think about moments, like shifting moments in a media landscape, like now is the time where creators are becoming a dominant player in the space. And I think like all of the consolidation and all of the business model disruption, like that creates like slowness from like traditional media, and creators can move really, really fast, and they know what their audience wants. And they like, we iterate, we test and iterate and move in days and weeks as opposed to months or quarters. And I think if you want to enter into this space, waiting 2 quarters, like it's going to be a different space, and 2 or 3 people are going to have taken the spot that you could have taken. So don't wait. The time for the creators to really dominate the market is now.
Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for being here.